Hello guys, Ancient Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. And if you saw my last video, my latest video that I released yesterday, which was the how to install the FSR3 Frame Generation mod by LukeFz, well, I made a mistake. Now what I can do to kind of compensate my mistakes is this, making another video explaining you how was I wrong. Well, it happens that when this mod got released, one of the biggest issues that we have, and we still do in most games, is the UI shimmering / flickering. So when you're playing the game, frame generation is working very well actually, but when you look at the UI, for example, when you're playing a shooter game like Robocop, when you're looking at the amount of bullets that you have left and so on, as soon as you move the camera, the UI will shimmer and flicker or kind of ghost. It will kind of start ghosting a lot, and that's annoying, and in some games it makes them almost unplayable. The same for The Witcher 3. Games where you move the camera a lot, it makes it almost unplayable. But it seems that now with the newer versions of this mod, you can actually replace the DLSS Frame Generation with FSR3 Frame Generation. And as soon as you do that, well, no more UI ghosting or flickering or shimmering. And also in most games where you do that, where you kind of replace the DLSS Frame Generation with FSR3 Frame Generation, you can also use the upscaler you want, or you can even not use any upscaler at all, and that's a major advantage. So you can use, for example, FSR3 Frame Generation, you can use it with XeSS, you can use it with FSR, or you can use it even on native resolution, and that's one of the biggest points, one of the biggest changes from the previous video. On the previous video I could only use it with the frame generation because that's how the mod worked before and how it basically works in almost any game, but as soon as you use the frame generation method, kind of replacing the frame generation method, you can actually use the frame generation usually without any kind of upscaling technique, or using XeSS, DLSS mod, FSR, or once again, not even any kind of upscaling technology. So that's a major plus, on the top, of course, of not having any more UI shimmering and flickering. And just because of that, I'm gonna leave you with today's sponsor. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mode, bringing you all the software deals you need, like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and even Windows Server 2022. For all of these, you can use my SKG discount code for 25% off, getting a Windows 10 serial key for only $16. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. But anyway, if you want a step-by-step guide of how to install these mods, you can go to the previous video that I made, because that's exactly a step-by-step guide. On this video, I'll just show you what you have to do. Basically, you have to go to the Patreon, to the LukeFz Patreon. You actually have to be a patron, or unless you have the mod, of course, because the mod was leaked. But anyway, then you go to mods LukeFz, and then you select, for example, the latest version. Then you select the game that you want. For example, in Robocop, all you have to do is go download the files, copy the files inside your game folder, okay, and then just change this, run the first time, and then just change this. I'll just show you here the files changes, okay. The files, one of the files are here, so this is a file. This is the FSR file, and these two are the loader files, which will load the FSR into the game. After you run the game the first time, this file will appear, and then all you have to do is change this file. And all I'm doing in this video is actually showing you the options and then showing you the game that the UI does not shimmer or flicker. For example, in Robocop, all you have to do is select the mode to default. So you don't need to do the replace DLSS FG, not in this scenario, okay? But all you have to do is this, and then enable the fake Nvidia GPU and enable the AMD Unreal Engine DLSS workaround. So instead of false, you make these two true, then you can just, well, run the game. As you can see, 1440p, and we're using TSR upscaling at 67%, which is basically the quality settings. And even there, since we're running maximum settings on the 6700 non-XT, well, Robocop is quite a heavy game. Even with upscaling, it's working well, poorly. And as you can see, 50 FPS, 55. As soon as we go and we enable the DLSS mod, which basically contains the upscaling, if you use FSR, it will enable upscaling as well. So, for example, if you use DLSS, now we're immediately at 97, 98, and I can definitely feel the smoothness difference. It is just way smoother. But if you look at the UI, okay, for example, on the top left corner, yeah, it shimmers a lot. Now, if I go, for example, and use FSR 2.2, as we can see, frame generation is still working. 90, 94, frame generation is still working, but once again, lots of shimmer. So what you have to do basically after doing this is go, press the DLSS, enable the frame generation of the DLSS, which is much better, and then go to NVIDIA Frame Generation and enable it. Apply. As soon as you do it, yep, the UI is working. It's kind of, well, it's kind of stuttery. Well, let's close the game and let's open it again and I'll show you it works. So here we are back again, and now, yes, much smoother. It kind of bugs sometimes in this game, Robocop, and you might need, if you are changing settings, you might need to restart the game, but yeah, much smoother now. And well, once again, frame generation enabled, and look at the UI. Yep, no shimmer, no ghosting whatsoever on the UI. The only thing that, well, does have some problems, but also has problems with frame generation is that little thing telling you where to go, 70 something meters, and yeah, but anything else past that, man, just works perfectly with no UI issues whatsoever. Now let's try, for example, Cyberpunk 2077. I go to my Cyberpunk 2077 folder. Okay, I need to go to the real engine folder, which is this one, so Cyberpunk bin x64. And then once again we have the files here that you have to download here and then copy to this same folder of Cyberpunk, okay? Then you run the game for the first time once again, and this file will appear. Close the game, open the file, and you need these settings. On here you have, instead of using default on Cyberpunk 2077, you have to use the replace DLSS FG. So basically just go here, copy, then select this one that will say default, copy, bam, you're good to go. You don't need to enable fake NVIDIA GPU nor anything like that. 1440p, and we're running XeSS. I'm not even running, once again, I'm not even running any kind of upscaling like the DLSS mode or anything like that. I can even turn off the upscaling, yes, and I'm still running frame generation without any kind of upscaling. And no UI shimmering nor flickering, because once again, we're using the DLSS frame generation option. If you disable it, you immediately see the FPS dropping to 52, as you can see, 52, and yes, it is way stuttery than before, way more stuttery than before. 52, as soon as we enable the DLSS frame generation, means that you don't need any kind of upscaling. If you do that technique of replace the DLSS frame generation with FSR3 Frame Generation, yeah, 85, and I can tell you right away that we do have some issues there. But in terms of UI, it works perfectly. The draw weapon, even if we go out of the vehicle, for example, in terms of the bullets left and so on, no shimmering whatsoever. And well, as I told you before, this applies to Witcher 3 as well, exactly the same, just replace the DLSS frame generation, well, technique, and as you can see, 40 FPS. We have 40 FPS without any kind of upscaling or frame generation. Then we go to the video settings, display, and we have the option to enable frame generation without, once again, without any kind of upscaling. Just select on the DLSS frame generation, and we went from 40 something to 68, 69. And I can tell you right away that the fluidity is much better, a much smoother gameplay. We do have some input latency, I can definitely tell here, but it is still much better than playing at 40 FPS because it is much smoother. But once again, we're not using any kind of upscaling. It's just the normal anti-aliasing at 1440p with the frame generation. That, as you can see, the UI does not shimmer for a single bit. The UI is perfect. Finally, no kind of UI flickering, shimmering or ghosting, and the experience is much better. So once again, sorry LukeFz for not showing this on the first place. Then we can go to for example, the anti-aliasing settings, and you can select XeSS, the DLSS mode, of course, or even FSR2. For example, I can go with XeSS instead of having to use FSR. If you like XeSS much better, you can use XeSS, and here we are, using XeSS at 114 FPS. So basically we went from 40 with native, no kind of frame generation to 117 with XeSS quality and frame generation, and let me tell you that it looks much better. The flickering is much less than it was even on the character when using the frame generation, the DLSS frame generation mode, and the UI just works perfectly. Yeah, much better. And once again, the same applies to Spider-Man. All you have to do is go to your Spider-Man folder, in this case Steam Library, Marvel Spider-Man Remastered, and then copy the files to this main folder of Marvel Spider-Man Remastered. Once again, the files that you downloaded on LukeFz's website, that you have to be a patron of to access. Then you open the TOML file, you go here on Edit Notepad, fake NVIDIA GPU not needed, Unreal Engine DLSS workaround not needed. All you have to do is go replace DLSS frame generation, bam, there, and it works. With Marvel Spider-Man though, you actually have to go here on the Steam properties, you have to go there and enable this or add on the launch options the -force reflex markers. Otherwise, the DLSS frame generation mod won't work. You have to do this for both Spider-Man and Ratchet Clank. And as you can see, okay, we're running 1440p, no kind of upscaling, so no upscaling whatsoever. It's just native, basically 80 FPS, around that. Now, I can go here and show you 1440p, yeah, no ray tracing whatsoever. Native settings. Now I can just enable, we're running at 80 FPS, remember, I can just enable DLSS frame generation. Bam, we went from 80 to 130, which is more or less what DLSS adds, and look at the UI. Look at the UI, the map, for example. Yep, the map is working perfectly. We do have some movement artifacts, but that's a thing that also happens with DLSS frame generation, of course. Nothing that we can't really do about that, unless waiting for Nvidia and AMD to improve their frame generation techniques. But apart from that, yeah, it works much better. We went from 80 something to 130, 120, and the UI is finally fixed. Or instead of being obligated to use upscaling to use the frame generation, you can use it separately, and once again, you can use, for example, XeSS and frame generation at the same time, and boom, we're now at 160 FPS. The best thing about this mod, the replace DLSS frame generation, is that you can use the upscaling technique that you want. So once again, frame generation on one side and bam, upscaling on the other. Or once again, not even using upscaling, and you can run frame generation with native resolution, which for most people like me is the best option. And like I told you before, Ratchet Clank was another game where the UI was just way bad. Now we're running native, 1440p native with no upscaling and no frame generation. Nothing. As soon as I go here, I have the DLSS frame generation option available to use, and once again, I do not have to use any kind of upscaling. Just go there, frame generation option, bam, and we went from 50 something to 81 immediately. Now, the UI still flickers a bit in this game, not even close to what it did, but it still flickers a bit, sadly, but overall it is much better than it was before. It's not even comparable. The UI works much better than without the replace frame generation mod, the DLSS one. Now, once again, you can pack this with upscaling as well. You can use, for example, if you don't want to use FSR, you can use XeSS. Once again, XeSS, and we went from 50 something to 92, 93 FPS, which is a much more enjoyable experience. And once again, you can run it at native without the need of any kind of upscaling techniques. So it's a win-win situation if you ask me. Hogwarts Legacy is one of those games that works as well. All you have to do is go to, once again, Steam Library, Common, Hogwarts Legacy, go to the or the Phoenix, it's the Phoenix binaries, yes, Phoenix binaries, Win64 folder, and once again copy the files that you can download on the LukeFz website. Then run the game for the first time, this file will get created, open the file, and in the file, well, I actually had to use on Hogwarts Legacy, I had to use the older version, instead of using the most recent one, which is this one, the 0.10.2H1, I had to use the 0.10.1H1, so you go there, Hogwarts Legacy, and download the files, okay? I had to use the older one because the newer one just simply wouldn't work for me. Fake NVIDIA GPU changed from false to true, AMD Unreal Engine DLSS workaround from false to true as well, And instead of having the replace DLSS FG mode, I have the default mode. Although there's a downside of not being able to use the replace DLSS frame generation mod, which is basically that you have to use upscaling in order to enable the mod. As soon as you disable it, frame generation just won't work. Let's try the settings, for example. So without any kind of frame generation, we have 40 FPS. 40 FPS without frame generation. Once again, now we go to the settings, we go to the upscaling, we enable, let's say, XeSS. XeSS quality. You enable XeSS quality. Then we get, well, I would say that we get a bit more FPS, but we don't. Yeah, we do. It was still loading. So 55 now, 55, 60, with only XeSS enabled. And then we can go and enable the DLSS mod, the one that we want actually. So DLSS mod, bam, because once again the replace frame generation for me did not work in this game. We can go there and, for example, frame generation is disabled. So once again with the mod, yeah, it says 100 FPS, but if you look at it, the 100 FPS isn't working properly because the frame generation mod isn't working. So it says 90 something, 90, 80 FPS, 100 FPS there, but yeah, it just doesn't feel like it because in reality it isn't working. What you can do sometimes is when it is bugging, I believe that when it's bugging, you can just go to the settings here. And for example, change a bit in between the reflex on and on plus boost. And for example, the upscale sharpness. If you mess a bit with the upscale sharpness, as you can see, it changes a bit here. I don't really know why. But for example, at 0. Yeah, at 0, somehow it isn't working. Stuttering a lot. As soon as I enable the upscaling sharpness, maybe that's it. Even to 0.05. Something just really, yeah, the image change a bit. And yeah, now it is working. So you actually have to enable the upscaling sharpness in order for the generation mod to work. So if it isn't working for you, just enable the upscaling sharpness and it is working. So from 50 without any kind of upscaling or frame generation to 103, and yes, much smoother. Look at the UI, no shimmering on the AGD. No shimmering on the UI, flickering, nothing, just works perfectly. Great. Now there are some games that I still didn't manage to make them work. For example, Alan Wake 2, I tried some things, but I can't seem to make it work. Maybe after the last update it just doesn't work as it worked before, maybe. The mod needs to get updated as well. For example, I tried The Last of Us. The Last of Us, since it doesn't have frame generation by default from DLSS, well, it still shimmers on the UI. So Plague Tale Requiem is the same thing. It has frame generation of NVIDIA, but I can't just seem to make it work. It will always shimmer on the UI. The frame generation works perfectly, but the UI will still shimmer, even if you enable the frame generation option inside the game. It just, well, it's just how it works. I don't know really why. Some people may be able to make it work. I couldn't. There are some other games. Starfield also works, but there are more games that, and for example, Fort Solis also works, and Fort Solis isn't even included on the games here. So you can just go there, go to, for example, the generic file FSR2 files, download them, go to the Fort Solis folder, just put it there and it will work. Let me see if it is here. Fort Solis, for example, you go to the engine or Sycamore, I believe it's Sycamore binaries, yes. So go there, just copy the files and it will work. Once again, in this case, I just needed to use the default mode. No need to replace the DLSS Frame Generation, but I did need to use the fake NVIDIA GPU to true. And this makes it work in the game. You can enable the DLSS Frame Generation with the option, and the UI won't shimmer or flicker as well. So there are more games that have the DLSS Frame Generation that you can use, and they will work without any single problem of shimmering or flickering on the UI, okay? Dying Light also has frame generation, but I couldn't make it work. But overall, like I showed you, The Witcher, Cyberpunk, Fort Solis, Starfield works, Hogwarts Legacy as well. Things work, and I was wrong, okay? The method of installation is exactly the same as I showed you on the previous video. But as for the UI flickering and shimmering, well, it is much better now, and I'm glad that I was wrong, because after that I immediately went and searched a bit more, and I found that in these particular games it just works much better. Definitely worth it. If you're playing games that support the Nvidia's Frame Generation and you don't have any kind of UI shimmering, this mod is definitely worth it. And well guys, that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video. Sorry once again guys for not showing you how to properly use this mod on the first time. Once again, this is the proper way to use this mod in games like Cyberpunk, The Witcher 3 and so on, because you have way more options. You can use frame generation without any kind of upscaling. You can use XeSS with frame generation, and you have like a toggle on and off for frame generation, thing that you don't have the way I showed in the previous video. So it's much better this way, much better. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video guys. Cheers.